In 1620, while the Mayflower was in Provincetown, 18 of its men sailed in a small shallop, searching for a place to live. They came to present-day Eastham, where they were met by a group of Nauset. After a brief but violent encounter, the English left towards today's Plymouth. In 2020, we remember this first encounter. We explore its meanings for today and tomorrow.
Good evening. Welcome to tonight's episode of our Sunset series. I'm happy to welcome Steve Gulrich, who first came to Eastham 40 years ago with his wife Mary, and they purchased a home not far from our famous First Encounter Beach. Following careers in the Boston area, they retired here to town 13 years ago and have pursued various volunteer opportunities. Steve conducted bird surveys for Audubon, served on the Open Space Committee of our town, chaired the Forest Advisory Committee, and now, in the reason we've asked him tonight, now he's sitting as president of the Friends of the Eastham 1651 Arboretum. So, Steve, welcome. Could you start, please, by telling us about the Arboretum project, its history, its origin, all of that, please.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Tom. I'm happy to be part of the Sunset series. So, I'll say most of us have heard the history and seen the old photographs of how the vegetation on Cape Cod has changed over the last 400 years. Nauset Native Americans coexisted with the forests and lands of the Outer Cape and Cape Cod without much change for many, many generations. Evaluation of pollen in sediment cores taken from Jemima Pond nearby have shown that the predominant forest type in Eastham going back 2,000 years has been pitch pine oak. With the settling of Plymouth colonist families in our area, 1644, and the establishment of the town of Eastham in 1651, the landscape rapidly began to change and the population grew. The forest was gradually cleared for agriculture and timber uses until by the early 20th century, over the last 100, there were very few trees. The land was essentially stripped of woodland. Over the last 100 years, with changes in land use, much of Eastham's landscape, including Wiley Park, has gradually returned to a predominantly pine oak forest. The Friends story began in the fall of 2001, the year Eastham celebrated the 350th anniversary of our town's incorporation, when an industrious band of townspeople came together with the idea to return a portion of Wiley Park to a native species forest, recreating an environment similar to pre-colonial times. The woodland was proposed as possibly including white pine, hemlock, beech, hickory, and maple, along with the existing pine and oak, with a project timeline of 100 years. It was imagined to be a refuge, a place for contemplation, and a memorial for September 11th. The town approved a grant for the forest, established the 1651 Forest Advisory Committee to oversee the creation and maintenance of the woodland. It engaged a consulting group to create a handbook for guidance to include an appropriate planting list of trees, shrubs, ground covers. Our group, the Friends of the Eastham 1651 Arboretum, was incorporated as a nonprofit assemblage of volunteers to carry out the plantings, maintenance, invasive control, community education, and fundraising. To date, we have planted over 300 trees, shrubs, and ground cover specimens in Wiley Park.
So what have you planted? What species are you working with?
Well, early on, we generally followed the species list created by the consulting group for our working handbook. Trees included tupelo, elm, hickory, sassafras, red maple, holly, beech, white pine. Shrubs were bayberry, beech plum, shadbush, blueberry, spicebush, swamp azalea, and winterberry. The only ground cover we planted was wintergreen. Some of these species were already observed in isolated locations in the park, but project goal was to restore, as close as possible, a balanced 1651 woodland, hopefully within the century, and our plantings were made with the intention of increasing species populations. We have here just a quick look at an overview of what's been done in the park. This is all of Wiley Park. This is Great Pond. This is the bridge pond down below. And this is the parking area. Only to show that our plantings encompass pretty much all of this area and many different species. Those are all those little different colors. This is a map that's being updated regularly, and I'll speak more to that later.
Good. So it's a 100-year plan. How ambitious. Now you're probably 2 decades or so into that 100 years. What have been some of the surprises to you?
Well, we certainly expected that there would be challenges along the way, that's for sure, Tom. By 2015, both the Forest Advisory Committee and our Friends Group were observing that some of our plantings, after initially growing well for a time, began to look unhealthy. Some species struggled and some were lost in the long run. Some of that is expected. Together, we turned to Cape Cod Cooperative Extension, and the Horticulture Extension Director was very helpful, thoroughly assessing on-site issues throughout the park, identifying existing species, taking soil samples, evaluating our project list as well. His report pointed out that except for the pondside border areas, Wiley Park soil generally presents quite a survival challenge with a very coarse sand and has extremely low water holding capacity. It's strongly acidic and possesses little organic matter. In short, some listed plants are unlikely to have been present locally prior to colonization and were improperly suggested for our original list. And in fact, were more evident, yes, on Cape Cod, but more in the Upper Cape, where there are more nutrient soils. The upshot of this has been a revised planting list 5 years ago and a more critical siting of the new plantings in the park.
And in these 5 years now, since you revised the plan, good you caught it enough to revise it. How are you really closely following how that plan's working?
Yeah, record keeping has always been an important part of this project. Our objective is to have the ability to track each plant that is put into the ground. To this end, we have endeavored to record every specimen with its location as accurately as possible and occasionally assess its condition over time. In the last 20 years, we have progressively used different GPS locating devices and metal detectors to track previous plantings with slowly improving accuracy, some difficulty in the forest. Good news recently is that as a result of the efforts of a dedicated member of the Forest Advisory Committee, one of the original founding members of the organizations, we are making great leaps in GPS accuracy and have access to a much more sensitive metal detection device because we put a metal stake in near each plant. That allows us to find them. This will eventually allow us to greatly improve planting summaries and maps like this one for use by our groups and the public.
Thank you very much for sharing all of this. It's wonderful that we have this group in our town doing this for the town, for our region. So if I or anyone else watching tonight wants to join or support this, how do they do that? Who do they contact?
Well, the Friends are connected with the community through a newsletter. We're seen at the Windmill Weekend celebrations and support various horticultural and forestry education programs in Eastham. And we're also working on a Facebook page and website soon. So volunteers are always welcome for field work, and most of them join our board for friendly library meetings every few months. We'd like to invite those interested in being volunteers or even just supporting members to contact us at 1651friends@gmail.com.
1651friends@gmail.com.
Correct.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
It's an honor
Tom.
to have you here.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Joannaholic, and I'm the coordinator for the Sunset Series with Eastham 400. I'd like to give you a brief update on our plans for the rest of the summer regarding the Sunset Series. Each Sunday, a presenter will read an excerpt from Ian Saxon's book, The Story of the First Encounter at Nauset. And some of the other episodes for the week will reflect on themes that correlate to the topics that Ian discussed in that chapter of his book. Other episodes will continue to focus on current events, important dates in history, and meanings for today. If you're interested in finding a specific episode or a series of episodes that are related thematically, you can now do so on both our website and our YouTube channel. To find these thematic groupings on our website, you can go to the Sunset Series page on eastham400.org and then scroll down until you see a list of all of our thematic groupings and click on the name of the topic that you would like to look at. You can also find these same groupings on our YouTube page if you go to our channel page on YouTube, Eastham 400, and then click the Playlist tab. Thank you.